The contract was up. I slid the divorce papers across the table, thinking my 3-year tour of duty as a stand-in was finally over. But she shredded them right in front of my face and announced, her voice like ice, "Liam, this divorce isn't happening. You're just going to have to get used to being my husband." I exploded, yelling that her long-lost love was back. So what the hell was she playing at? She just said a marriage license was more binding than a contract. When her precious one that got away came back to town, he tried to humiliate me. I was about to put him in his place when my so-called wife, Claire Vanderbilt, whispered in my ear, "You'd better," in front of me, hit him. So I sent him flying with a roundhouse kick. The look in her eyes was a bizarre mix of excitement and challenge. This woman wouldn't divorce me, and now she was egging me on to beat up the man she supposedly loved? The untouchable CEO, the ice queen of Manhattan's corporate scene, had finally ripped off her mask, and underneath, her eyes burned with a sick, possessive fire. I tossed the divorce papers onto the polished rosewood of Claire Vanderbilt's desk. The light scrape of paper onward sounded like the final, weary sigh of my 3 years in captivity. She swirled a glass of red wine, the scarlet liquid clinging to the crystal in a seductive curve. Her gaze was part playful, part of her usual Arctic chill. It landed on me, but it felt like she was looking right through me at something far more interesting. I broke the silence, trying to keep my voice light, casual, full of the relief I was about to feel. "Your boy Wonder is back, which means our little arrangement is officially over. Those are the divorce papers. Sign them. I'm a big boy, Claire. I know how to make a clean exit. Don't worry, I won't make a scene." I glanced at the ridiculously expensive clock on the wall. "Oh, and by the way, congratulations. Your darling Julian Astor's flight from London landed at JFK at 2 this afternoon. If my math is right, he's already breathing the same polluted New York air as you are." I couldn't resist a final jab. After 3 long years, the clouds have finally parted for the great Claire Vanderbilt. Your wish has come true. My voice dripped with mock sincerity. It's time for this whole sham marriage, this whole human shield drama, to draw its curtains. Time for us to go our separate ways. Claire took a slow sip of wine, the corner of her mouth twitching into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're well informed. It seems you've been paying very close attention." "Professional courtesy," I said, shrugging with feigned helplessness. "Got to honor the contract, right? It's been 3 years. You're free, and I'm supposed to get the hell out of your life." I laid it all out, the bargain we'd struck. The deal was I play the dutiful husband, a shield to keep the old boys club on your board off your back about settling down. I fend off the gold diggers and social climbers. In return, I got to use the Vanderbilt name and your resources to launch my own company, to build my own life. And I did. Now the real thing is back, I continued, pushing the thin stack of papers a little closer to her. So this counterfeit, this placeholder, knows it's time to make himself scarce. Can't keep hogging the spotlight, right? That would just be pathetic. I plastered on my most sincere smile. "Come on, Claire. It's just a signature. Let's make it quick. You sign, I'll pack my bags, and be gone so fast you won't even find a stray sock. I'll be out of your hair, out of the way of you and your precious Julian." Her beautiful, cold eyes never wavered. She slowly set down her wine glass, picked up the papers, and scanned them with an infuriating lack of urgency. Then she looked up at me, her voice flat. "And you? You don't want anything else? A house, a car, money, or me?" She drew out the last word, her tone rising with a hint of teasing that made my stomach clench. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face a mask of nonchalance. "Ah, very funny, Claire. I may not have many virtues, but I like to think I'm a man of my word. I keep what's mine. I don't touch what isn't." I watched her raise her hand, and I let out a silent breath of relief. I thought she was about to sign her name with the same brisk efficiency she used on billion-dollar contracts. The next sound froze the smile on my face. Rip, Raya. The divorce papers, the documents that held the key to my freedom, were torn into 1,000 pieces between her slender, pale fingers. The white confetti rained down like a sudden winter flurry, scattering over the priceless Persian rug, her shoulders, and my own feet. Claire's voice was laced with a chilling cold as she spoke, each word a tiny shard of ice. "Liam, are you that desperate to leave me? Fine. Then I'll make sure you don't get what you want. This divorce? It's not happening." She padded toward me in her soft slippers, yet she moved with the force of an invading army, an overwhelming pressure that sucked the air out of the room. The blend of rich wine and her expensive perfume, normally intoxicating, suddenly felt suffocating. Her eyes bored into me, burning with a rage that threatened to consume me whole. I'll admit, her sudden switch-up rattled me. A cold sweat broke out on my back, but the fear lasted only a second before it was consumed by a tidal wave of fury. Claire, are you out of your goddamn mind? I practically screamed, jumping to my feet. Did you hit your head on the way in here? We had a contract. Black and white. 3 years. We use each other. We don't interfere. That was the deal. Your one true love, Julian Astor, is back. You want me to stick around? What? As the world's most powerful third wheel. As a witness to your epic, earth-shattering romance. Sorry, not my kink, you psycho. Why are you pulling this crap now? To my shock, she laughed. It was a beautiful, terrifying sound. Psycho? Yes, maybe I am. What are you going to do about it, Liam? I've changed my mind. The divorce is off. You think you could just run away? She scoffed. Dream on. From now on, you're going to stay right by my side, and you're going to be a good little husband. The last 5 words, be a good little husband, were squeezed out from between clenched teeth, each one a hammer blow to my gut. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. The sheer absurdity of it all shattered my last bit of reason. I laughed, a harsh, grating sound, and pointed a finger at her. Not happening? Claire, get it through your head. We were a business arrangement. A game for 2 consenting adults. You stayed faithful to your long-lost love for 3 damn years. And now that he's back, you're going to play the devoted, inseparable wife with me? Are you nuts? You should be pulling this act with him. She smiled, a sly, triumphant look I couldn't decipher. Simple. Go ahead. Call the cops. File for divorce. Let's see who the court believes. The man with a flimsy, shredded piece of paper, or the woman with a legally binding, state-issued marriage certificate. That shut me up. She was right. Legally, we were husband and wife. In the eyes of the law, our contract was toilet paper. I mustered my last shred of defiance, my voice dripping with false bravado. Fine. You're ruthless, Claire, I'll give you that. You won't sign? No problem. I've got nothing but time. I'll print out 100 copies a day. I'll follow you to work. I'll show up on your dates with your precious Julian. We'll see how long you can stand it before you let me go. With that, I turned and stormed out. I couldn't stand to look at her for another second. The woman was insane. Completely and utterly insane. 3 years ago, I really was just a kid wet behind the ears. Fresh out of college, I was like a headless chicken, firing off resumes into the digital void, getting rejected from everywhere, and even losing my part-time bartending gig. The future looked like a black hole, and I couldn't even afford a decent meal to celebrate my useless diploma. I was Liam Stone, an orphan with a couple of fair-weather friends and pockets cleaner than a church floor on Monday morning. Just as I was seriously considering a career in manual labor on a construction site, she appeared, Claire Vanderbilt, materializing like a ghost from a different world. She summoned me to a coffee shop where a single cup cost more than my weekly food budget. She got straight to the point, offered me a job with a salary beyond my wildest dreams. The work? Simple. Act as a stand-in for her future husband. First, her fiancé, and then her actual husband. A stand-in for the one that got away. Even now, the phrase leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. I was stunned. I thought it was some elaborate new scam. But then she produced a contract, and the number of zeros on it made my head spin. I had to count them twice. What could I say? I remember the only 2 words that came to mind. And just like that, I, Liam Stone, went from an unemployed nobody to the nominal husband of the great Claire Vanderbilt. I moved into her penthouse, a place so huge you could get lost in it, and began a life of unimaginable luxury. Maine lobster for a midnight snack, $10,000 bespoke suits I wore like t-shirts, a garage full of cars more valuable than anyone I knew. Money became like paper, impossible to spend fast enough. I'll admit, it went to my head at first. When you've been poor your whole life, that kind of wealth is a shock to the system. My so-called friends practically turned green with envy. Liam, man, you're walking a tightrope, they'd say over the phone. A stand-in is just a stand-in. The second the real guy comes back, you're out on your ass. What's your plan then? The sour grapes were so potent I could smell them through the phone. How did I respond? So I'm out on my ass. The money I'll make in these 3 years is enough for me to coast for the rest of my life. Why would I need a plan? It was true. The monthly salary stipulated in the contract was enough to set a guy like me up for life. As long as I didn't do anything stupid, I'd never have to work again. Why would I risk starting a business? Why would I struggle? I wasn't an idiot. After that, the calls from my friends stopped. I guess they figured we were living in different universes. Fine by me. Less hassle. After about a year of this gilded idleness, I was bored out of my skull. My days consisted of eating, drinking, and staring at a computer screen. My bones were turning to jelly. So I did the unthinkable. I went to Claire and told her I wanted to do something, maybe start a company. What did she say? All right. Without even looking up from her work, she murmured, I have an empty office building in Midtown. It's just sitting there. If you want it, I'll transfer it to you for a nominal fee. Her tone was the same one you'd use to give $1 to a homeless person. My thoughts snapped back from that ridiculous memory. What was the point of thinking about it now? When I'd so precisely recited Julian Astor's flight information, Claire had teased me about being well-informed. I played it off as professionalism, but the truth was I'd been counting down the days on that contract since day one. I was praying for him to come back so I could finally be free, and now the contract was up, and Claire Vanderbilt, a titan of industry, was playing dumb and refusing to honor our deal. Go our separate ways. It was so simple. Why couldn't she understand? Why did she have to make everything so complicated? A complication for her, a complication for me, and a massive potential misunderstanding for that asshole Julian Astor. Just thinking about it gave me a headache. Endless, pointless drama. The frustration boiled over. I packed a bag, just a few changes of clothes, and my laptop, and walked out of the penthouse we had shared for 3 years. I didn't take anything else. I rented a small apartment not far from my office building. The one she'd sold me for pennies on the dollar, a constant reminder of her control. It was just a couple of blocks from her own corporate headquarters. The two towers were so close, they were even connected by a glass skybridge on an upper floor. A convenience that now felt like a leash. I'd bluffed about harassing her daily with divorce papers, about crashing her dates with Julian. But honestly, I'm not that much of an asshole. You don't burn bridges, even if you never want to see the person on the other side again. For now, I wasn't going to make trouble. I'd let her and her long-lost love have their happy reunion for a few days. I needed to see what kind of twisted game Claire Vanderbilt was really playing. I moved out of that suffocating penthouse, hoping for a few days of peace to figure out what the hell Claire was up to. I should have known better. Trouble found me faster than I could have imagined. I hadn't gone looking for them, but trouble, like a fly drawn to garbage, came looking for me. The so-called one that got away, Julian Astor, finally decided to grace me with his presence. Honestly, for a guy I'd only ever heard about, I already hated him. Judging by the way Claire had practically lived like a nun for 3 years, I expected him to be some kind of demigod. The reality was less impressive. I was in the underground parking garage of my office building. I just parked and was about to head up to the company I'd bought from Claire. I had just stepped out of my car when I saw a whole entourage marching toward me. The guy leading the pack could only be Julian Astor. His family apparently had some money, but compared to the Vanderbilts, he was strictly minor league. The legendary talent and charisma were nowhere to be seen. The suit was expensive, sure, but his hair was slicked back with enough gel to waterproof a submarine, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His face was plastered with a smile he clearly thought was devastatingly charming, but combined with his arrogant swagger, he just screamed douchebag. He spotted me immediately, his so-called bedroom eyes filled with undisguised contempt, as if I were something he'd scraped off his shoe. Well, if it isn't Claire's little lapdog, he drawled, dragging out the last word with pure venom. The goons behind him snickered. What's the matter? Claire not with you? He feigned surprise, then slapped his forehead as if in sudden realization. Oh, that's right. She's been so busy with me lately, discussing our new venture. I suppose she just hasn't had time for you. He sauntered closer, reeking of a cologne that smelled like someone had mixed it with sewage. He stopped right in front of me and lowered his voice to a malicious whisper only I could hear. You've been squatting in her life for 3 years. Isn't it time you moved your ass? A fake is a fake. The real deal is back, so why don't you get the hint and crawl back under whatever rock you came from? He leaned in closer. You're shameless, you know that? Pathetic. Claire's just too soft-hearted to kick you out herself, but don't think for a second that makes you anything special. I was already on a short fuse thanks to Claire's refusal to sign the divorce papers. Now this asshole was lighting a match. I've always been a physical person. I hit the gym, the boxing ring, and I've trained in martial arts for years, mostly to stay in shape and make sure people like this don't walk all over me. With all the crap going on, my patience was non-existent. I didn't waste my breath on a reply. I let my fist do the talking. Crack. A clean, straight right to Julian's smug face. His gelled head snapped back, and he stumbled backward, nearly falling on his ass. His posse of yes-men stared, mouths agape, shocked that I'd actually dared to touch him. Just then, a cool female voice cut through the air. What's going on? You're blocking the entire lane. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Claire. Of course she was here. Perfect timing. The second Julian saw her, the shock and pain on his face morphed into pure, theatrical victimhood. The guy was a master. He clutched his jaw, his eyes welling up like a B-movie actress. Claire, you saw that, he whined. I was just trying to say hello, and he attacked me for no reason. He's an animal. Look at my face. Claire didn't even glance at him. She ignored his crocodile tears and walked straight toward me. She came so close her shoulder brushed against mine that familiar scent of wine and perfume enveloping me again. Then, in a low, chilling whisper that was meant only for me, she said, each word heavy with a strange, dark excitement. You better. In my presence. Hit him. My entire body went rigid. What the hell was that? A threat? I whipped my head around to face her, to look into those deep, unreadable eyes. They were a swirling storm of coldness, amusement, menace, and, was that anticipation? A fire of pure, irrational rage ignited in my gut, burning away all reason. I couldn't look at her or the sniveling coward on the ground for another second. I spun around and started walking away, shouting over my shoulder, "You keep provoking me like this, and I'll beat his ass every single time I see him. I don't give a damn who's watching." Behind me, I thought I could hear Julian's pathetic whimpering get louder. I thought after the parking garage incident, that prick Julian would have learned his lesson. I figured he'd lay low for a while. I was wrong. The moron was back for more, and this time, he was even more disgusting. It happened at the coffee shop downstairs from my office. The moment I pushed open the glass door, the smell of roasted coffee beans mixed with some cheap, cloying cologne hit me. Then I saw his punchable face. Today, he was wearing an obscene pink and white suit. His hair was so greasy a fly would slip and break its neck. And that same self-satisfied, infuriating smirk was plastered on his face. "Well, look what the cat dragged in, mister." "Stone," he sneered, his voice just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Even the working stiffs need their caffeine fix, huh? I get it. Must be tough, getting kicked to the curb. A man's got to find a place to lick his wounds, right?" He lounged back in his chair, swinging his leg with the lazy malice of a cat playing with a mouse. "It's a shame, though. When I'm feeling down, I just find a few pretty girls to cheer me up. Can you afford that, Mr. Stone?" I ignored him and walked to the counter. But he followed me, sauntering over to my table just as I was about to sit down with my coffee. He leaned over, his gel-caked head so close I could smell his hair product. "Claire's been in such a good mood lately," he said, his voice a slimy, suggestive drawl. "We've been talking so much. About the past, the present, our future. She told me, that if her family hadn't pressured her back then, she never would have settled for someone like, well, you." He paused, clearly savoring the way I tensed up. Then he lowered his voice to a venomous hiss, right next to my ear. "Oh, and she also said that every single day with you made her feel sick, especially the thought of having to sleep in the same bed as you." She. Crash. A deafening bang cut him off. I shot up from my chair before he could react, and slammed the sole of my shoe into his chest with all the force I could muster. "Arg!" Julian yelped as he flew backward like a broken doll, smashing into a nearby table and sending coffee cups and plates shattering to the floor. I ignored the gasps from the other patrons and pointed at him. "I don't know about her family's pressure, but the only thing pressing about you is how goddamn annoying you are." Just then, the door opened again. Claire's glacial face appeared. She took in the scene. Julian sprawled pathetically on the floor, me standing over him, seething with rage. A flicker of something I couldn't decipher. Amusement? Satisfaction? Crossed her face before it settled back into its usual mask of cold indifference. But her eyes challenged me. They seemed to say, "Is that all you've got?" I remembered her whisper in the parking garage. "You'd better," in front of me, hit him. A volcanic rage erupted from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. "Fine. You want a show? I'll give you a goddamn show." Without a second thought, I strode over to Julian. As he stared up at me in terror, I grabbed him by the collar and hauled him to his feet. Slap, slap. 2 hard, vicious slaps, one for each cheek. They instantly turned red and began to swell. Then, I shoved him away like a piece of trash, and he collapsed back onto the cold, tiled floor. When I was done, I shot a defiant look at Claire, who was still standing in the doorway. I gave her a little nod, a silent, insolent challenge. Then I turned and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back, leaving behind the sound of Julian's pained whimpers and Claire's inscrutable gaze. Julian was curled up in a ball, his forehead beaded with sweat, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. He was trembling too hard to speak. Claire didn't move to help him. She just watched me leave, the corner of her mouth curling into the faintest, most unsettling of smiles. Then, with her usual elegant stride, she too turned and followed me out of the cafe. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. I figured after the second beatdown in the coffee shop that idiot Julian would finally get the message. Even the dumbest animal learns to avoid pain. Life had to go on. The company needed running. I shoved the thoughts of Claire and her psycho games to the back of my mind and threw myself into my work. I was deep in negotiations with a major new client. Landing this contract would keep my company afloat for 6 months. I'd pulled out all the stops, researching the client's every preference, and had set up a dinner at his favorite steakhouse. After dinner, we moved on to the time-honored tradition of relationship building at a high-end karaoke lounge. The drinks were flowing, the mood was great, and the client was all smiles. The contract was practically in my pocket. I was just starting to relax, thinking the night was a success. And then, of course, I ran into him. In the hallway, on the way to our private room. Julian Astor. The son of a bitch was like a curse. He had an entourage of about a dozen people with him, a flashy mix of guys and girls who looked like they'd stepped out of a bad reality TV show. My group was just 4 people, including the client, all of us in conservative business suits. We looked like what we were, professionals trying to close a deal. Maybe it was because he outnumbered us, or maybe because we looked so straight-laced, but Julian's courage seemed to have made a miraculous recovery. He probably thought we wouldn't risk making a scene in front of a client. He staggered in front of us, deliberately blocking our path, a fake, ugly smile plastered on his face. He spoke just loud enough for the few other people in the hallway to hear clearly. Well, if it isn't Liam Stone, you're like a cockroach, you know that? Why do you keep clinging to Claire? It's pathetic. I felt my jaw tighten. My client's expression soured. But Julian was on a roll, spitting as he talked. She told me herself, the sight of you makes her sick to her stomach. She wants me to tell you to get lost before she's forced to ruin you. You think a gigolo like you, who lives off a woman, is worthy of anything. The air went still. The soft piano music from the lounge speakers suddenly seemed jarring. The little red lights on the security cameras in the ceiling blinked ominously. My client's face had gone dark. I was trying to hold it together to salvage the deal. But Julian, seeing my inaction as fear, decided to push it. He reached out and patted my cheek condescendingly. That motherfucker. I could have swallowed that. But then his goddamn condescending hand, moved to my client and patted his cheek. The client's face went black. His eyes narrowed, burning with suppressed fury. I knew, in that instant, the deal was dead. Every ounce of my self-control shattered. To hell with professionalism. To hell with the contract. I looked up, my eyes so cold they could have frozen fire. Julian, still clueless, saw the look on my face and actually smirked. What? You gonna do something? What's with the weird dance moves? You trying to impress me? I didn't waste another word. My body moved on pure instinct. The muscles I'd honed in the gym for years coiled tight. In a blur of motion, I lunged forward. Before Julian's friends could even register what was happening, I was on him. His smug face filled my vision. Then, I launched into a spinning hook kick, a vicious, whistling arc of motion that connected squarely with the center of his chest. Thud! The impact sounded dull and heavy. Julian's body went airborne, flying backward like he'd been hit by a truck. He slammed into the wall at the end of the hall with a sickening crunch, then slid to the floor in a heap, curled up like a cooked shrimp. I could have sworn I heard a distinct crack from his ribs. His friends were frozen, staring at me as if they'd seen a ghost. The hallway fell silent. The only sound Julian's choked, pained gasps. I shook out my throbbing ankle and walked over to my stunned client. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice even. Mr. Thompson, I am so sorry. An unexpected situation. This has completely ruined the evening. Please, take your friends and go. I'll handle this. We can discuss the contract another time, if you're still willing. Mr. Thompson, a seasoned businessman, just nodded, his face pale. He and his team beat a hasty retreat, probably having never witnessed such raw violence in a business setting before. Soon, someone called security, who in turn called the cops. The NYPD arrived and, without much discussion, hauled me, Julian, and his entire crew down to the local precinct. I sat in a cold, sterile interrogation room for what felt like hours, wondering if Claire would find out, and what she would do if she did. Then the door opened. Claire's face, as exquisitely sculpted and cold as ever, appeared in the doorway. She looked like she'd rushed over. There was a faint sheen of sweat on her forehead. She strode toward me, her beautiful eyes locking onto mine, filled with a complex storm of emotions. And under that icy surface, I saw something I couldn't quite believe. A flicker of genuine anxiety. And something else. Something that looked disturbingly like admiration. By the time I got out of the precinct, the sky was already turning gray with the approaching dawn. Claire drove in silence, her face colder than a Siberian winter. I was fine with that. I leaned back in the passenger seat and closed my eyes. The car finally stopped in the parking garage of Mount Sinai. Go on up, she said, her first words since we'd left the station. Go see your handiwork. Her tone was flat, impossible to read, but it definitely wasn't a compliment. The hospital smelled sharply of antiseptic. Julian was laid up in a VIP suite, looking like a mummy in training. Tubes snaked out of him, and one leg was hoisted up in a plaster cast. A medical chart lay on the bedside table. My eyesight is good. A quick scan told me he had 4 broken ribs, a fractured arm, a fractured tibia, and extensive soft tissue damage. Looked painful. He deserved it. Claire spoke in low tones with the attending physician, her expression growing darker by the second. Then she turned to me, her sharp eyes fixing on me as if she wanted to burn holes through my skull. She stormed over, her voice suddenly shrill and high-pitched. "Liam, are you completely insane?" She raised her hand, her slender fingers hesitating in mid-air as if she wanted to slap me. The blow never landed, but her hand trembled. "Do you have any idea what you've done? In broad daylight, in front of witnesses, you beat him that badly. How the hell was I supposed to get you out of there? Huh? Do you think the law is a joke? Do you think I'm a miracle worker? Were you trying to go to jail? Were you testing me, try to see if I had the power to pull you out of a prison cell?" She spat the words out in a furious torrent, her chest heaving, her cheeks flushed with an unnatural red. I listened to her rant, a cold sneer forming in my heart. She wouldn't divorce me. She let that asshole harass me over and over again. And now that I'd finally put him in his place, she was here, chewing me out, supposedly on his behalf. What kind of twisted logic was that? I didn't bother arguing. I turned my head and yelled at the whimpering, moaning figure in the bed. "Listen up, you little prick. I don't care where or when. If you ever show your face in front of me again, if you ever so much as breathe in my direction, I will beat you. I will beat you so badly your own mother won't recognize you. You hear me?" In the bed, Julian flinched, and his moans quieted. Claire stared at me, her expression a tangled mess of anger, astonishment, and something else I couldn't decipher. Excitement? I didn't have the energy to analyze her psycho gaze. I'd said my piece. I turned and walked out. Every second in that room felt suffocating. This time, Claire didn't follow. She didn't say another word. Outside the hospital, I hailed a cab and went back to my small apartment near the office. The days that followed were surprisingly quiet. Julian Astor seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. He was either finally scared straight, or Claire had locked him away somewhere. But the divorce still hadn't happened. I brought it up a few times, but Claire would either deflect with some excuse or just give me the silent, icy treatment. Living in that small apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I felt like I was being watched constantly. I kept my blinds drawn, and I'd scan my surroundings every time I left the building. But I never found anything. No one following me, no suspicious cars. The feeling was like a tiny splinter under the skin. Not fatal, but a constant, nagging source of anxiety. Claire didn't contact me, either, except for necessary work-related communications. We had entered a strange, silent Cold War. The days bled into weeks. It was almost 2 months. In that time, my life was a simple loop. Work, then the boxing gym to vent my frustrations. The anger and that unnerving feeling of being watched were building up inside me. A pressure cooker with no release valve. The big client I'd lost, thanks to Julian's psychotic episode at the lounge, was still a sore spot. But I, Liam Stone, am stubborn as a goddamn mule. I wasn't going to let it go that easily. I swallowed my pride and channeled the same persistence I used to use in college to score free meals. I called the client, Mr. Thompson, until my phone was hot. I groveled. I apologized. I basically bent over backwards. And you know what? It worked. Mr. Thompson, probably moved by my sheer, shameless tenacity, finally relented and agreed to give me another shot. I was so thrilled, I almost offered to wash his car for a year. The next few days were a blur. I was running on pure adrenaline, burying myself in the project. I pulled all-nighters rewriting proposals, schmoozed his team with a smile plastered on my face, and even dreamt in PowerPoint slides. We were on the verge of closing the deal. It was right there. Then the phone rang. It was Thompson's office. "Mr. Stone, I'm sorry. After an internal review, we've decided to go in a different direction." Click. I wanted to smash my phone into a million pieces. All that work, all that groveling, all for nothing. All because of that prick, Julian. The fire in my gut roared back to life. I was pissed, frustrated. I needed to hit something. After work, I went straight to my regular boxing gym. I suited up and unleashed hell on the heavy bag. Thump, thump, thump. Every punch was a kill shot. Sweat poured off me. The bag swung wildly, like a man having a seizure. My mind was a slideshow of Thompson's pitying face, Julian's smug face, and Claire's inscrutable, icy face. "All of you can go to hell." I grunted, my fist ablur. I was starting to feel the burn, the satisfying release of exhaustion. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure limp through the gym entrance. You gotta be kidding me. I stopped, the heavy bag still swaying. The newcomer was hobbling, his right arm in a bright white cast, held in a sling. It was Julian Astor. He saw me at the same moment. Our eyes met, and the air in the gym seemed to crackle and freeze. His already pale face went sheet white. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. I grinned, sweat dripping from my chin. I beckoned to him with a gloved finger. "Come here." Julian froze, rooted to the spot. Then, as if pulled by an invisible string, he started moving toward me, limping and hopping like a wounded dog with its tail between its legs. He looked so pathetic I almost laughed. I put my sweaty, gloved hand on his good shoulder. He flinched like he'd been tasered. "Long time no see, buddy," I said, my voice dripping with false friendliness. "Let me tell you something. That little stunt you pulled at the lounge, it cost me a huge client. The same guy whose face you wanted to slap." I paused, letting the words sink in. "So, tell me, how are we going to settle this?" I leaned in closer. "Do I beat the shit out of you again to blow off some steam? Or do you pay me for my emotional distress?" Julian's face went from white to a mottled purple. His lips trembled. "Bro, dude, I'll pay, he stammered. Don't hit me. Please. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong." He was on the verge of tears, practically ready to kneel and beg. "Money." I raised an eyebrow. "Nah, too tacky. Here's the deal." I pointed to the heavy bag next to me. "You stand there. Let me throw 2 punches. Just 2, to get out of my system. Then we're even." My smile widened. "And don't even think about running, because if I have to drag you back here, it won't be just 2 punches." Julian's face lost all color. He trembled like a leaf in a hurricane as he shuffled in front of the heavy bag. He looked like he was about to piss himself. I took a deep breath and threw 2 lightning-fast punches. Whoosh, whoosh. The punches were vicious, whistling past his ears and slamming into the heavy bag with explosive force. The bag shuddered, letting out 2 deep, resonant thuds. I could feel the wind from my fists make the skin on his face ripple. He'd squeezed his eyes shut, cowering. When he finally, shakily opened them, he saw me standing there, still smiling. The kid's legs gave out, and he nearly collapsed. "All right, we're done here," I said, taking off my gloves. I clapped him on the shoulder. "Now, get out of my sight." Julian scrambled away like a man granted a last-minute pardon from the governor. I shook my head, watching his pathetic retreat. But then, the son of a bitch, still limping and with his arm in a sling, actually changed course and started hobbling toward a woman doing yoga in the corner, a sleazy smile already forming on his face. Jesus Christ. I had to hand it to him. The man's dedication was almost inspiring. Maimed and terrified, and he still couldn't stop himself from trying to pick up women. What a talent. In the eyes of the New York elite, Claire Vanderbilt and I were the it couple. So, of course, we had to make an appearance at the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala. The ballroom was a sea of flashing cameras, tuxedoed titans of industry, and women in gowns that cost more than my first car. I had Claire on my arm, a standard issue, adoring husband smile fixed on my face. She played her part perfectly, a vision of grace and power. To the outside world, we were the ultimate power couple. After 3 years, I was a master of the role. My eyes swept the crowd. And of course, there he was. You can't escape bad luck. Julian Astor. Ever since I'd scared the living daylights out of him at the gym, he'd completely vanished from my life. I thought he'd either grown a brain or Claire had finally put him on a very short leash. But here he was at an event like this. He was holding a champagne flute, laughing with some group of people I didn't recognize, looking every bit the smarmy, over-gelled prick he'd always been. He must have felt my gaze because he glanced in my direction. That one look was all it took. The smile on his face froze. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers and crashed to the floor, spilling red wine on the white marble. He looked like he'd seen the devil himself. Then, as I watched with a certain grim satisfaction, he turned and practically fled, scurrying to the far corner of the room without a word of apology to his companions, trying to blend into the wallpaper. The people around him stared, probably wondering what was wrong with him. A wave of pure, unadulterated satisfaction washed over me. This guy, who had been so arrogant, who had tried to put me down time and time again, was now reduced to this. He was a mouse, and I was the cat. The fear I had instilled in him was burned into his very soul. The feeling was better than closing a multi-million-dollar deal. The Julian problem was solved. He was no longer a threat, which meant it was time to deal with the final and most difficult problem. I glanced at the woman beside me, who was smiling dazzlingly as she chatted with the senator. The woman who, for some insane reason, refused to divorce me. She seemed to be in a good mood tonight. During our loving interactions for the cameras, she was even displaying a new, unsettling brand of gentleness. At one point, she reached up to straighten my tie. Her cool, Slender fingers brushed against my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. She leaned close, her lips near my ear, and whispered, "You look very handsome tonight, Liam." Her voice was soft, almost tender, but when I looked into her eyes, I saw it. A strange, feverish heat deep within them. A powerful, predatory look of absolute certainty. It was the look of a hunter who had cornered its prey. A chill went through me. What was this woman planning now? After the gala, we were driving back to the penthouse. The silence in the car was thick and strange. I was trying to figure out how to bring up the divorce again when she spoke first. "Liam." "Yeah. When we get home," she said, her voice eerily calm. "We'll sign the divorce papers." My head snapped toward her. I stared at her, dumbfounded. Her face was a blank canvas, her tone as casual as if she were commenting on the weather. "What did you say?" I thought I misheard. "I said, let's sign the divorce papers," she repeated, her voice still perfectly flat. Was it really happening? Freedom, arriving just like that? My mind raced. This woman, what the hell was her game? First, she refuses to let me go. Now she's the one suggesting it. Something was wrong. This was a trap. My gut screamed a warning. But the lure of divorce, of freedom, was too strong. It was all I'd thought about, dreamed about for months. "Okay," I said, my voice low. Whatever her game was, I'd play along. I just needed that signed document. I didn't care about the rest. The car pulled into the familiar underground garage. As I followed her into the elevator and up to the penthouse, a strange sense of dread began to creep over me. It intensified as she led me up the stairs to the second floor, toward her bedroom. A room I had never once been allowed to enter. Her bedroom was just as I'd imagined. Opulent, luxurious, and intensely private. The air was thick with her signature scent, that mix of expensive perfume and something else, something personal and intimate. As I stepped across the threshold, the feeling of unease became a blaring alarm. But the hunger for freedom was a fire that burned away all my caution. She walked to a magnificent antique vanity and pulled open a drawer. "The pen is in here," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. "I'll sign it now." Back in the penthouse, the familiar, oppressive weight of the place settled on me. It was even worse this time, following Claire up to the second floor, into the forbidden territory of her bedroom. The air was thick with her scent, but it was different in here, denser, mixed with a sweet, warm fragrance that was deeply unsettling. I should have known then. I should have turned and run. But the word divorce was a siren song, luring me onto the rocks. Her bedroom was as luxurious and cold as the rest of the penthouse, sterile and impersonal despite its opulence. She walked to a heavy, carved desk and gracefully pulled open the center drawer. "The fountain pen is in here. My favorite one," she said softly, her voice seeming to float in the unnaturally quiet room. I watched her back, my heart starting to pound erratically. She took out an expensive-looking black pen and leaned over, the tip scratching softly against paper. In that moment, the sound was almost hypnotic. I forced myself to stay alert, my eyes locked on her. A few seconds later, she straightened up, holding the thin document that represented my freedom. She turned and walked slowly toward me. Her face was still a calm, unreadable mask, but her eyes held a dark, knowing glint. "It's signed," she said, holding the paper out to me. "Check it carefully. I wouldn't want you to think I cheated you." Her tone, was it gentle? What the hell was wrong with her? I snatched the document from her hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. Freedom. It was right here. I dropped my head, my eyes frantically scanning the page for her signature. All my focus, all my being, was concentrated on finding those 3 words, Claire Vanderbilt. And in that split second as my head was bowed, I caught a flicker of movement from her other hand in my peripheral vision. Before I could react, a sharp, piercing pain shot through my left arm. SSSH. I tried to yank my arm back, but it was caught in a grip of steel. It was her. She had grabbed my arm with her other hand. I snapped my head up and found her face inches from mine, flushed with a bizarre, ecstatic excitement. And in her hand, I saw the syringe, already half empty, its needle buried deep in my bicep. "You!" I started to curse, but a powerful, cloying scent suddenly flooded my senses from below. A damp cloth, appearing from nowhere, was clamped tight over my nose and mouth by her free hand. The smell was overwhelming, rushing into my lungs, straight to my brain. Chloroform. I struggled, trying to push her away, trying to scream, but my strength vanished in an instant. My limbs went numb, my legs turning to jelly, unable to support my weight. My vision blurred and swam. MMPH. MMPH. The muffled grunts were all I could manage. The scent grew stronger, my consciousness fraying, peeling away layer by layer. In the last second before everything went black, I felt my body slump, and she caught me, pulling me into a tight, possessive embrace. Her face was pressed against mine. Her lips, usually set in a cold, hard line, were now twisted into a smile I had never seen before. A smile that was gorgeous, insane, and terrifying in its absolute ownership. Her lips moved, her hot breath ghosting across my ear. Was it a hallucination? I thought I heard her whisper, "Liam, my Liam. Finally, you're all mine. You're never, ever leaving me." The bitch. The crazy bitch got me. Then, an endless, suffocating darkness swallowed me whole. I don't know how much time passed. It could have been a second. It could have been a goddamn century. I was floating in a thick, murky soup of nothingness. Then, a faint, warm sensation was the first thing to break through. A strange touch. On my lips. Yes, my lips. Soft, wet, with an unmistakable warmth. And a gentle, insistent pressure. A suction. What the hell? Next, my sense of smell was violently switched back on. A heavy, potent female fragrance flooded my nostrils, aggressive and overwhelming. It was familiar, yet different. And mixed in with it was another scent. The salty, musky smell of sex. It was thick, real, and inescapable. Oh fuck. My senses came rushing back all at once, like I'd been yanked out of the deep end of a pool. I fought to open my eyes, my eyelids feeling like they were weighted with lead. Slowly, painfully, they fluttered open. My vision was a blurry, swaying mess, like looking through water. God, my head was spinning. The first thing I saw was a patch of pale, smooth skin, incredibly close. It seemed to rise and fall with a steady rhythm. My gaze struggled to move upward. And then I met a pair of eyes, inches from my own. Claire. Holy shit. She was on top of me. And she was naked. Her black hair was a tangled mess, strands of it falling across my face and neck, tickling me with a maddening, feather-light touch. And me, I was spread-eagled, a humiliating X shape with a cold, heavy restraint on each wrist and ankle. Chains. Fucking metal chains. I was chained to a bed, a ridiculously ornate, massive bed. I couldn't move. This crazy woman. She'd actually tied me up. Claire's stunning face was so close I could see the flecks of gold in her irises. She obviously hadn't expected me to wake up so soon. She froze. For a split second, a look of pure, unguarded shock flashed in her beautiful eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by something much stronger, much more terrifying. It was a look of ravenous, insane possession, mixed with a sick, profound satisfaction. Her eyes were brighter than I'd ever seen them, and it was horrifying. She didn't pull back. She leaned in closer. Her hot breath, smelling of wine, and her own unique scent washed over my lips. "You're awake," she purred. Her voice wasn't the crisp, cool tone of a CEO. It was husky, raw, as if saturated with lust. Each word was a feather stroking my eardrum, yet each carried the weight of a stone. The drug wore off a little faster than I expected, she murmured with a low laugh. The sound was soft, musical, and filled with a chilling, triumphant intimacy. Every muscle in my body seized. A tidal wave of shock and a rage born of total violation and helplessness threatened to tear me apart. I wanted to fight, to leap up and strangle the life out of this monster. But it was hopeless. My limbs were as limp as overcooked noodles. I couldn't summon an ounce of strength. That fucking needle. I could only force a few broken, furious words through my clenched teeth. "You drug me. Claire. You fucking." She raised a single, slender finger, tipped with a blood-red nail, and pressed it gently but firmly against my lips, silencing my useless curses. The tip of her finger was cool, yet it burned with the heat of her skin. A wave of absolute humiliation crashed over me. Her cold finger was still pressed to my lips, a silent, absolute command. "Liam." She whispered my name, and the sound was so soft it was almost a caress, yet every syllable was a hammer blow against my sanity. Her face, usually an icy mask of indifference or contempt, broke into a smile. It was a beautiful, twisted thing. Her eyes, curved into crescents, roiled with a terrifying, possessive desire. I felt a wave of goosebumps crawl over my entire body. This woman wasn't just crazy. She was a monster. Actually, she paused, clearly savoring the way my body trembled with helpless fury. 3 years ago, the day we signed that contract, her gaze went distant, lost in what she clearly considered a fond memory. Fond? I wanted to smash my fist into her beautiful, psychotic face. I wanted to do this even then, she confessed. Do what? Chain me up? Drug me? What the hell else did she want to do? I also wanted. She leaned closer, her hot breath a poisonous vapor against my ear, her words slick and cold like a snake's tongue. To lock you in the basement. The basement? My brain stalled. What kind of demonic shit was this? My basement, she specified, her tone dripping with an unshakable sense of ownership. Chained up, belonging only to me. Her voice was thick with a sick fascination, as if she were describing her most prized possession. And I was that possession, about to be stored in a dark, damp cellar. My mind short-circuited. Rage, humiliation, and a profound, primal fear of this woman's unplumbed depths washed over me. She saw the horror in my wide eyes and seemed pleased. It's okay that you don't remember, darling, she cooed, her tone suddenly innocent, yet underpinned by an absolute, terrifying conviction. But trying to leave me? Oh no, that's not allowed. That casual, sing-song not allowed was colder and sharper than any threat. I want to scream. What didn't I remember? All I remembered was being played for a fool by this lunatic. We still have so many things to do together, she said, her tone as casual as if she were planning a vacation. Things to do? What the hell could I possibly do with a psycho like her? For example, she paused, her blazing eyes fixed on mine, her gaze full of a twisted, beautiful vision for our future. A future in which she had total control over her new favorite toy. We could have a baby. A baby. The words detonated in my skull. I almost choked, the air knocked from my lungs. Have a baby? With her? The thought was so repulsive, so utterly vile, it made my skin crawl and my stomach heave. This woman wasn't just insane. She was a full-blown, grade-A psychopath. I listened to her unhinged fantasies, my body chained and useless, rage and humiliation stabbing at me like 1,000 needles. I frantically tried to remember, to analyze the drug she'd used. Why was I so weak? I had to find a way out. I couldn't let this be the end. No matter how hopeless it seemed, I had to fight. But after dropping that bombshell, she seemed done with talking. She gave me no more time to think or react. She lowered her head, her beautiful, terrifying face filling my vision. And with her actions, she began to assert her absolute, horrifying ownership. The drugs still hadn't worn off completely. The cold metal of the chains on my wrists and ankles was a constant, maddening reminder of my situation. I was chained to her bed like an animal. Liam. She was moving again. This lunatic seemed to have an inexhaustible supply of energy. I tried to fight to twist my body away. It was useless. My limbs felt like lead, like wet noodles, completely unresponsive to my commands. Every struggle produced nothing but the mocking clink of the chains and a sharp, excited gasp from her as she pinned me down even harder. The cold metal of the chains and the searing heat of her body were a study in obscene contrasts. I felt like a fish, gutted and nailed to a cutting board. No, a fish could still flop around. I didn't even have the strength for that. Claire Vanderbilt, the woman who was famously as cold as a statue, as distant as a star. Now she was a raging fire, a goddamn inferno threatening to burn me to ash. She was in complete control, orchestrating everything. Every move she made was filled with an undeniable dominance and a sick, obsessive devotion. Humiliation, rage, the two emotions burned in my chest. But my body, this traitorous piece of meat, was starting to respond. A strange, unwelcome pleasure began to build. Fuck, I wanted to slap myself. Get a grip, Liam. You're being raped, but the sensation was like a creeping vine, wrapping around me, growing stronger and more undeniable with every passing moment. She laughed softly in my ear. The sound was full of satisfaction, of triumph, of the cruel glee of a cat toying with its captured mouse. You see, Liam, your body is so much more honest than you are. Then she started listing things, intimate details of my life. You hate cilantro, don't you? Your favorite movie is The Godfather. You've seen it at least 10 times. You sleep on your left side. In college, you had a secret crush on that girl from the art department, and you got blackout drunk after you found out she had a boyfriend. Every hair on my body stood on end. How the hell could she know all of that? Those tiny, insignificant details. For the last 3 years, she hadn't just been using me as a shield. She had been watching me, studying me, like a goddamn stalker. You used to not even look at me, she said, her voice now laced with a strange, wounded resentment. Now, you can only look at me. You can only think of me. You were so cold to me for 3 years. Was it because of Julian? It doesn't matter. He'll never bother us again. Tears of pure, helpless rage started to slide from the corners of my eyes. She felt the moisture on my cheeks and paused for a second. Then she hugged me even tighter, her arms like steel bands, threatening to crush my ribs. Don't cry, darling, she whispered, her voice as sweet as poison. It sent a chill from the top of my head to the soles of my feet. I'll be good to you. You'll learn to love this. You'll learn to love me. We can be like this every day, forever. Wouldn't that be nice? I squeezed my eyes shut. I couldn't bear to look at her face, beautiful and twisted by lust and possession. This night was an eternity longer than the past 30 years of my life combined. And for her, I realized with dawning horror, this was probably paradise. The days began to bleed into one another. I was a prisoner in this room. I was Claire Vanderbilt's pet. She would show up every day on a schedule to spoil me. She'd feed me by hand my favorite foods, but with anything I disliked meticulously removed and replaced by things she deemed nutritious. She'd bathe me, washing every inch of my body with the focused, obsessive care one might use on a priceless porcelain vase. Her gaze was intense, adoring, and filled with a tenderness that terrified me to my core. For the first few days, I screamed. I cursed. I fought with what little strength I had. Then, gradually, I fell silent. I went numb. I became a puppet, letting her move me however she wished. Sometimes I would just stare at the ornate crystal chandelier on the ceiling for hours. A grown man, imprisoned by a woman. In this way, occasionally, I would catch a flicker of something in her eyes when I resisted, a flash of excitement. This lunatic, she even enjoyed my struggle. So I stopped. On the surface, I became compliant, even cooperative. But in my mind, the wheels never stopped turning. I had to find a way. I had to escape. Every day I spent like this was another piece of my soul being chipped away. My consciousness drifted in a fog of humiliation and forced arousal. Lying back and letting someone else do all the work should be a fantasy, right? But when you're the one chained down, it's just a different kind of hell. A ridiculous thought born of madness. Had she broken me already? Regret. Endless, bottomless regret. Why did I ever sign that stupid contract? Why did I think she was just cold and not completely deranged? Why couldn't I see the psycho hiding behind the Ice Queen facade? The tears came again, hot and shameful. They slid down my face and dripped onto the silk sheets, leaving small, dark stains. It was so goddamn humiliating. I was tied to this bed like a sacrifice on an altar, forced to endure this insane, degrading ritual she called love. And all I could do was cry.